How's it going, everyone? I hope we're all having a fantastic day. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the Sony 90mm macro. Is it another macro lens or is it the sharpest lens ever made? I'll let you judge in this video. Pretty cool, huh? Alright, so first off, let's talk about the specs. This is a 90mm f2.8 1:1 magnification ratio macro lens. This is a G lens, not a G master lens, so don't expect the superior build quality from its siblings with the GM status. But we'll get to that in the build quality. For now, let's talk about the buttons that come on this lens. It has a focus button switch from full to the macro side. It has an optical steady shot with on-off button switch and another customizable button. So the customizable button, if you have a compatible camera, is a plus, always a plus really. I personally have it to set the peaking display on or off to see where I'm focusing when I'm manually focusing, which I'll be doing a lot with a macro lens. As for the focus limiter or the focus button from full, I don't typically use full. I'm either on the macro side of things from 0.28 to half a meter, or from half a meter to infinity. This is basically saying whether you want to be focusing in the macro spectrum or in the infinity spectrum, or you can just set it to full. But I personally found that when you use it on either macro or the far end, the autofocus works faster instead of the full. Now moving on to the build quality. This is where I kind of was disappointed when unboxing this lens. Like the first time that I've touched, let's just focus. The first time that I've touched this side basically, and here I was like, let me just, yeah, you hear that? This is cheap plastic in my opinion. Doesn't optically affect anything. This lens is still great, but it just, maybe it's just the fact that I'm using a Sigma 24-70 art lens, which is far superior in terms of build quality. This kind of feels a bit cheap, but again, this is a $1,000 lens, so I would have loved to see a better build quality in terms of the plastic. I have not dropped this lens, it's still kind of new, I had it for a month, but fingers crossed. I'm not sure this will hold up durability wise. It does come with a protective lens hood that you can apply and remove from the lens, and it's good. It's plastic, but it's good, feels solid. If you drop your lens, it's gonna protect it. Overall, the build quality is okay considering the price, just a little bit of cheap plastic here and there. Now moving on to a better side of this lens, which is the autofocus. Especially when you set it to full, it does hunt a lot, so I typically just leave it on the macro. But if you're doing macro photography, you're going to be manually focusing anyway. Nonetheless, I'll put some autofocus tests on the screen for you to see. Now moving on to manual focusing. I particularly like this feature where you slide the autofocus to manual focus like this. So right now it's in autofocus, I just slide it down and now I'm manually focusing. As for the manual focusing itself, it is very smooth. It doesn't feel loose, it feels tight, which is how focusing should be really. Is very accurate and I just love using it. It feels good, it feels premium despite the cheap plastic on this lens. The focus throw is really good and the focus rubber feels very premium. Also, I liked how they numbered the distance so you kind of know how far away your subject is from you. So we kind of started off bad with the build quality and then moved on to the mediocre side of things with the autofocus, and we're working our way up to the top with the sharpness, and dare I say, this is the sharpest lens ever. Maybe this or the Sigma 105 macro lens, but in my opinion this is, well, definitely top 3 sharpest lenses ever, and this is the sharpest lens that I have ever used. So when taking macro photography, you're generally gonna be around the f5.6 to f11. Sometimes I did take some pictures with f2.8 and it is still very sharp, but the problem with f2.8 is that there's not enough focusing area, so I typically shoot 90% of my macros at f8 or f11. depending on the lighting situation of course, but shooting anything from the f5.6 to f11 range is just incredibly sharp corner to corner. You can see for yourselves in the pictures that I'm showing right now. Everything is just super sharp. The textures, the details, I mean it is a macro lens so it has to be super sharp anyway, right? But shooting at f2.8 in the center it is still incredibly sharp. I would argue that f8 and f2.8 in the center are pretty much the same, maybe 90% the same. I barely notice a difference, but corner to corner sharpness is definitely improved when you stop down to f5.6 or f8. And generally speaking, when you are shooting macro, you're gonna be at that range anyway because f2.8 is just too small of a focusing window. Continuing with the good side of things, moving on to the optical steady shot, which is OSS. I always leave this on unless maybe the 5% of the time that I put this on a gimbal, I'll turn it off. But if I'm shooting video or if I'm taking a picture, I always leave this on. And it does make a pretty noticeable difference, especially when shooting video. This is with OSS off, and this is with OSS on. As for pictures, I shot handheld pictures at 1/60th of a shutter speed with the OSS on, and it wasn't blurry at all. I did try to shoot at 1/40th of a second, even with OSS, and trying as much as I can to steadily hold the camera. I couldn't really get it to work. I mean, it is a macro shot, so maybe your hands are more steady than mine, but the OSS is really great, especially for video. I don't think you can shoot video unless you're using a gimbal, but you can shoot video handheld with the OSS off. I don't know why I'm holding the lens. I should probably put it down. Lastly, I want to talk about the more than macro part. This lens is a macro lens, obviously. For me, you can do portraits, you can even go as far as taking car shots, or it's super sharp that you can use it for a lot of things. Maybe for portraits, it's obviously not the best because it being that sharp is gonna introduce, well, it's just gonna show all the flaws and wrinkles in the face, but it is still very sharp, and if you can do some skin retouching, you'll be fine. I use this for video as well when I want, not even just macro, if I want a 90mm semi-telephoto look, I will pop this on, and I know that it doesn't disappoint because it is super sharp. Finally, let's talk about value. There's not much bad to say about this lens besides the plastic cheap build quality here and there. It's not everywhere, but it is present. You will notice the difference. But besides build quality, the performance of this lens, the sharpness, the macro pictures, the OSS, everything about it is just really great, and that's what you're looking for in a macro lens anyway. If you were to buy a macro lens, you want it to be sharp and you want it to have good optical stabilization, right? This lens has both of those. It is very sharp, arguably one of the sharpest lenses ever, and it has a really good optical steady shot. Really great if you're willing to do some skin retouching. You gotta keep in mind that it will show a lot of imperfections on your skin because, again, it is super sharp. But for macro photography, this is incredibly sharp and it can turn any object, any product, when you shoot at a very close distance from just a normal mundane object to something very epic due to that 1:1 magnification ratio. So all in all, at a little bit more than $1,000, this lens is perfect value. It does compromise a little bit on the build quality, but it compensates for that on the performance side and optical side of things. So I would definitely recommend this lens for any Sony user that would like to shoot macro, or even if you don't want to shoot macro, you just want a very sharp lens. The 90mm focal length is just 5mm more than the 85, and considering how sharp this lens is and the fact that it opens up to f2.8, you can't really go wrong with it. So that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, leave a like down below, subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.